I'm in a strange state of mind. I don't know what has kept me away from ALA for so long. And so I've come here today, wandering around the campus wide-eyed, went and sat in on the end of the meeting of the advisory group. I think I've been co-opted, I'm not quite sure, but I'm in a state of mind and exceedingly happy to be here on this great day in this great institution. There isn't much that can be taught by way of leadership. Now, I'm going to be in trouble with everybody. I like that word, the stuff, what do you call them? The stuffulty. I'm going to be in trouble with all of the stuffulty for saying what I am. But if there's one thing that we can equip people with, two things maybe. The one is a switch in their brain that is about on and off, between right and wrong, between good values and bad values. And the other thing, and sometimes these two coexist, is direction. There's a great, now departed writer, Tony Judt, who raises the question in a very interesting way, and it's a question to our generation. He writes, something is profoundly wrong with the way we live today. For 30 years, and that's all of your lives, I presume, we've made a virtue out of the pursuit of material self-interest. Indeed, this very pursuit now constitutes whatever remains of our collective purpose. We know what things cost, but we have no idea of what they're worth. We no longer ask of a judicial ruling or a legislative act, is it good? Is it fair? Is it just? Is it right? Will it help bring about a better society or a better world? Those used to be the political questions, even if they invited no easy answers. We must learn once again to pose them. When I speak to you of that on-off switch in your brain, it's about the ability to formulate those kinds of questions about the actions of yourself and others, of the actions of yourself in community, in society. Is it good? Is it just? Will it make a contribution to a better society and a better world? Because ultimately, that's what the meaning of our contribution is about. It's not about the speed with which we can accumulate material wealth. It's about the difference we set out to make. And so I'm saying, without wishing to be on the wrong side of your stuffology, no, I said it wrong again. Forget about it. Well, I'm saying again, if those are the skills they equipped you with, then we've got a generation of leadership in the making. Because those are the skills we need. If those are the skills we have, then other things fall into place.
This year's been very interesting for me, and I've been reflecting on it a lot this week, first in a meal that I had with Mr. and Mrs. Scudder, and then last night with the Global Advisory Council. I'd spent over 8 years really focused at the high level, in the clouds, focusing on strategy, building the partnerships that could bring this ecosystem together to support our leadership development model. And this year, it has been a privilege and a challenge, and probably the greatest leadership learning experience of my life, to then dig back into the nuts and bolts of the Academy, and to think about the method by which we develop leaders here. And Mr. Manuel, I've been reflecting on this question of whether or not leadership can be taught at some length. And I think it's quite clear that if the teaching of leadership were something that you could get on a Khan Academy video or in a textbook, we probably would not find ourselves facing some of the challenges we face today as a global society. So perhaps leadership cannot be taught, or at least not taught in the traditional textbook sense. But I do believe leadership can and is learned. And I think the opportunity that is in front of me as dean, in front of our faculty, and indeed our students every day, is how we create an environment in which leadership is learned through our leadership development model. Identifying young people with potential, giving them space to practice leadership, to practice and build that on-off switch, and connecting them with opportunities that can be catalytically propel them on their leadership journey throughout their lives. Some of you will remember a conversation we had early one Saturday morning about Abraham Lincoln, the great American statesman, and the journey he took in his political career. Lincoln was an amazing example of converting failure into a learning opportunity through process. But Lincoln was also great because he avoided the crutch of making an excuse of failure. He avoided allowing the fact that I can learn from failure to become a reason not to try his best, not to strive for excellence. And so today, my final message to graduates as they go on to the next phase in their lives and in their journey is about the difference between good failure and bad failure. Good failures are those like Lincoln's, those that come from a spirited effort, born from genuine personal commitment that is rooted in passion and our values. And it is good failure because we have embedded a process by which we will learn and grow. In my opinion, bad failures fall into just three categories. First, failures of ethics. We must strive to never compromise the values that form the foundation of our work. Second, failures of effort, of not trying our best to create a success despite whatever hardships we face. And finally, most importantly, failures to learn from failure. For repeating a process and expecting a different result is indeed the definition of insanity. Each of us can avoid failures of ethics, failures of effort, and failures to learn from failure. It is a choice that we can, and that I hope we do make. But we will never be able to avoid failure itself if we are pushing ourselves to be the leaders we can become, or the leaders that we need to become if we're going to have the impact that we seek to have on this continent and on the world at large. The journey ahead of you will be full of failures, large and small, from which you will derive your greatest learning and ultimately your greatest success.
When I look back and reflect on my early experience, it is crystal clear that I've grown as a person, and I'm sure many of you think the same. Yes, there are ups and downs, twists and turns, tears and frustrations, but we all know that where there is gold, lie rocks to be tackled.
Come to the end of a special time in your lives, the graduates. 2 years at ALA. You came, you spent time together, you met some of the most interesting people you're ever going to meet in your life. You were exposed to some of the most outstanding teachers that you're ever going to meet in your life. And you're exposed to an outstanding array of opportunities throughout Africa and throughout the world. And now what? What do you do with all these experiences that you've had? Where are you going to go in the world, and what are you going to do with this to impact Africa? Now, as we all know, Africa, there's a shortage of leaders. There's a dearth of good leadership. And so as a result, those of you who have leadership skills and have been, and these leadership skills have been developed further, and they're going to be developed even further as you progress through your life, are going to be called on many, many times to make a difference, to contribute in Africa. This continent, more than anywhere else, is going to be drawing on you all the time to lead. And you're going to be exposed to many, many, many moments where you need to step up and be a leader. I call these moments that you're going to experience as you go through life moments of obligation. The first time I heard about this concept of the moment of obligation was in 2006 when Mr. Bradford and I were participating in a competition called the Echoing Green Fellowship, which identifies emerging social entrepreneurs all over the world. And they go through a competition and they win a prize and some funding and so forth. And they said to me, "So Fred, tell us, when was your moment of obligation? When did you know that you had to step up and do something?" And I talked about the moment in 2004 when I knew I had to quit my job at McKinsey to follow a dream that I had. Even though I didn't know where I was going to get $125,000 to pay McKinsey back for sponsoring my MBA. I knew that I had to follow a dream that had been keeping me up at night. And this was a dream of the African Leadership Academy that I'd been hatching together with Chris, Mr. Bradford, and Peter Momba and Achaleke, the three other co-founders who are here today. But I just knew I had to do it. And so began my journey with the African Leadership Academy, and something that I've been involved in for the last 10 years. Now, throughout your lives as young leaders, you are going to be exposed to these moments of obligation. Now, moments of obligation are normally caused by two things. The one is a sense of outrage, where you see some sort of injustice or cruelty or some unfairness in the world that makes you sick to your stomach and makes you want to do something about it. The second thing that causes moments of obligation is excitement about an opportunity. Now, this could be a great opportunity you see to make money, to start a business, to change the world through something exciting. That's not necessarily bad, but that's really going to make a difference, and it's exciting to follow. This would have been the feeling that Bill Gates had when he decided, when he was 19 years old, and he saw the microcomputer was being invented, and that there was going to be a new era in technology. And he decided he was going to quit his education at Harvard and start this company that became Microsoft. Or this would have been the feeling that one of the members of our Global Advisory Council, Phuthuma Nhleko, how he must have felt in the early 2000s when he saw the opportunity to build the largest cell phone company in Africa, MTN. And he saw that there was an exciting chance to do this in Africa. So whenever we experience these moments, we're faced with a choice. Do we act on it? Or do we walk away and ignore it and leave it to someone else to tackle? Obviously, in our work with African Leadership Academy, I think a lot about leadership. And one of the things that I've come to believe is a trait that makes great leaders is that great leaders are those who are able to make wise choices when they're faced with these moments of obligation. Specifically, great leaders ignore 99% of the moments of obligations that tug at their hearts. Why does this habit make leaders great? See, I believe that we have all been put on earth to fulfill a destiny. And most of the moments of obligation that you experience don't fall within your destiny. There are other leaders whose destiny it is to tackle those problems, who are better prepared for those problems. And so every minute that you spend tackling a problem that is not in your destiny is time spent away from doing what you actually should be doing, from doing what you were put on this earth to do. And so you need to ignore those moments. But every now and then, in that 1% of the time, it is going to be your moment to step up and to act and to pursue that moment of obligation. It is in those 1% of the cases when the world will need you, when Africa will need you to invest your hearts, your minds, your resources, and your time to make it happen. So as you go out into the world and become leaders and work on the continent, you are going to be exposed to these moments of obligation. And today I want to offer you a guide, a roadmap for making these choices that you are going to be forced to make. This guide is a compass that I've used each and every time I've come to a crossroads in my own life, where I've had to decide, do I pursue this opportunity or do I walk away and leave it to someone else to do? There are three big questions that I always ask and that I want you to ask yourself every single time you're going to be faced with this moment of obligation. And trust me, as a leader in Africa, because you are in such shortage, you are going to have more moments of obligation than you can ever experience. Imagine. These three questions are, number one, is it big enough? Is this thing that you're being asked to do big enough? You have too many talents, scarce resources, to be wasting time solving small problems. Especially those of you who have been chosen, who have made it through a very rigorous selection to make it to the African Leadership Academy. This year there were 4,000 applications to the Academy for 100 places. In your class, I think there were about 2,500 applications. And you made it to the Academy from 40 countries in Africa. The world needs you, Africa needs you to tackle big problems with this very unique opportunity and this very unique experience that you've had here at the Academy. The second question you need to ask is, are you passionate about this thing? I call this the sleepless night test. Does this issue that you're faced with consume you so much that you can't sleep at night? That every person you meet, you must talk to about this idea? Does it outrage or energize you so much that you can't sleep? If it does, then perhaps it is your moment of obligation to follow. The third question, are you more than anyone else in the world, or better than most people in the world, uniquely positioned to make this happen? Because of certain things that have happened in your life. Some that happened completely by chance, or something that happened because you made other choices. Are there some things that you've done that have made you better prepared than most people in the world to actually make this thing happen? If the answer to those three questions is right, is yes, then it is your time. It's your 1%. It's your time to step up and to actually pursue this obligation. And when you do that, you'll see that you're going to be on fire. And you're actually going to be fulfilling your destiny as a leader and doing what you were put on this earth to do. Now, I want to give you a couple of examples, case studies of some of the young leaders in the ALA network who are either fulfilling their destinies as young leaders or that I can see them doing so in the future. The first case I'm going to talk about is a young man from my inaugural class, who some of you may know, but I know a lot of our graduates will definitely know. A man called Eddie Okech. Eddie Gicheru Okech. Now, for those of you who don't know, and for our guests, Eddie Okech was in our inaugural class. He joined us in the year 2008 and left here in 2010. But as we say, you never graduate from ALA. You're always part of our family. Now, Eddie Okech, in the recent Kenyan election that just took place, had a tremendous impact on that country. Eddie was involved in building a youth movement, which he started when he was here at ALA, that ultimately grew to touch about 5 million young people in Kenya. And his mission, his single mission, was to ensure that the election violence that happened in Kenya, when the elections took place in 2007, just before he came to ALA, didn't take place again. And for those of you who know what happened in Kenya, in that time, the politicians in the country had manipulated a lot of the young people and gotten them from different ethnic groups to fight against each other for their own objectives as politicians, and that had led to a lot of the violence and disruption in the election. And so Eddie's movement was all about galvanizing young people in Kenya to agree not to be manipulated by the politicians in these elections that came place. And he managed to build a whole NGO. I think he had a staff. He had raised about $100,000 and had a media campaign. He was conducting rallies, bringing politicians to talk to young people, to make commitments that they wouldn't manipulate them. And he got all these 5 million ambassadors in Kenya between the age of 18 and 35 who falls right in the electorate to agree not to be manipulated by the elections, by the politicians in this election. And if you consider that there were something like 12 million registered voters in the election in Kenya, and Eddie touched 5 million of them through his campaign, you can see that he played a crucial role in making sure that the election that took place was peaceful and fair, much against what people were expecting. Now, I believe Eddie's fulfilling his role as a leader, his destiny as a leader. Trust me that Eddie is going to be one of the youngest elected politicians in Kenya. And I won't be surprised if one day he becomes a member of parliament or a president or something of Kenya. Now, let's take him through those 3 questions that I talked about. Is it big enough? Absolutely. Public service, trying to, alter the shape of an entire election in a country that has been racked by electoral violence in the previous election. That's a big issue. Mobilizing 5 million young people to action. That's a big issue. That is where someone who has had the kind of experiences and the preparation like Eddie Okech should be investing his scarce leadership capital. So he definitely ticks that box. Is he passionate? You need to meet Eddie, if you haven't, and hear him talk about young people and how he wants to make sure they do the right thing, and his passion for making sure that Kenyans come together and realize that they're not, even though they come from different ethnic groups, they are one nation. And he's been that passionate ever since he came to ALA. Is he uniquely positioned? Question number 3. Definitely. You see, before Eddie came here, he personally experienced some of this violence himself. A machete was put to his leg because he had tried to protect someone from a different ethnic group during the electoral violence. And he saw personally the cost of this division in his country. And so when he was going out there and saw this, when he was called upon, he saw this moment of obligation to make a difference in this election. He had of all the people in the world, he had had a very unique experience that made him qualified to follow this opportunity. So Eddie is definitely fulfilling his destiny as a leader. If in the future, Priscilla from your class decides that she's going to become the Minister of Education in Malawi, will she be fulfilling her destiny as a leader? Let's take her through those three big questions. Is it big enough? The issue of education in a country like Malawi, which has such low literacy levels. Absolutely. Is she passionate about this issue? If you've heard her give a presentation about Pan Africa, and all that, I'm sure she's been hassling all of you in her class to get involved in her project, and the Kari Book Project to get young people in Africa reading and writing about Africa, and to expose the world to a different way of seeing Africa, and to get young people in Africa to read. Absolutely, she's passionate. Is she uniquely positioned? Yes. Very few people at her age have been involved in starting a project like this, like the Kari Book Prize, and all the work that she's been doing with Pan Africa to build an organization that can, transform the way that young Africans read and that can promote literacy across the continent. And she's been getting this practice and is going to be preparing her uniquely to be able to become the Minister of Education one day. If Mope goes on to a career in agriculture, do you think he will be fulfilling his destiny as a leader? Let's take him through those three questions. Is it big? In some countries in Africa, 80% of the population depends on agriculture. Africa, of all the comparative advantages we have in the world, agriculture is one of the things that we can do much better than most places in the world. We have abundant land. Something like 70% of the arable land that still has to be cultivated is in Africa. We have sunshine, we have rain. It's a big, big, big opportunity. If he pursues that, definitely ticks that first box. Is he passionate? Okay, I don't need to go any further. Is he uniquely positioned? Yes. Through the work he's been doing with Ahanang and all that, learning about agriculture. He wants to go to Earth University in Costa Rica, which has one of the best agricultural programs in the world. If he comes out of that and goes on to become a big pioneer in agriculture in Africa, would he be one of the few people in the world who had several unique experiences that will make him better prepared to follow that opportunity than anyone else? Absolutely. So it's magical when these three things come together. And so as you go on and become leaders for Africa, and you're called upon many, many times, and you have these moments of obligation, I want you to remember these three questions. So I want you to think back on all the challenges and experiences you had at ALA. And as you go through life, the experiences that you're going to have, and the different moments of obligation that you're going to have, I implore you to ignore most of them. If they don't tick those three boxes, are they big enough? Are you really passionate about it? And are you truly the best position to make it happen because of prior experiences you've had? Move on. But for that 1% of the time, when the answer to those three questions is a resounding yes, then don't let your destiny as a leader pass you by. That is the moment that you need to step up and make the right choice and follow your destiny, because Africa needs you to do so. So in conclusion, I have one wish for you. May you have sleepless nights. Thank you.